Hello and welcome to the CIPD HR People Pod, the CIPD's fortnightly podcast bringing you the topical stories and expert insights on issues impacting the world of work and the profession. My name's David D'Souza, still that hasn't changed much. I'm Director of Profession at the CIPD, and joining me in the studio we have, for a first appearance,
Mark Pavlika.
Didn't seem sure there was a slight pause. We'll see if we edit it out. And we also have
Alix Bolton.
And just before we get into anything, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, so your University Challenge intro. So Mark, if we go with you.
So I am Mark Pavlika. I am Chief People and Purpose Officer for an integrated advertising agency called Bicycle London. And I live in London.
Excellent. Chief People and Purpose. So you're a CPAP.
I'm a CPAP. Yeah.
You might be the first
CPPO.
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 I think it might be the first of
Sometimes they
those
tried
we've
to
had.
call me C3PO at work, and they saw me dancing once, and they called me Party. People, Party, and Purpose Officer.
We're going to stray into what we should share about things like partying a bit later. And we have Alix Bolton, second time in the podcast.
Second time. Thank you for having me back. So I'm Alix Bolton. I am European Chief People Officer for a business called Smollan. We are the world's biggest outsourced retail provider and brand activation agency, working with some of the coolest brands and retailers around the globe. 6 months in, still a new girl, although I think that ended after about 3 weeks. Having fun, doing lots.
You're really big as well, aren't you? Because I genuinely hadn't heard of you. And I think you weren't expecting me to have, but your headcount's massive.
Yeah, 90,000 globally, not that many in Europe, because, imagine territories like Middle East and Asia where it's feet on the street. Yeah, about 15,000 across Europe and growing.
We're Tiny Tim. We're 60.
I mean, there's room for growth there, isn't
Yeah,
there?
absolutely.
Just give yourself 6 months, who knows where you'll be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just before we kick off today, I'm going to give a shout out, which we don't do very often, but I thought we'd do because I saw something really nice this week, which is on LinkedIn, Pete Colby, who is a genuine expert on mediation and how to avoid conflict escalating in the workplace, gave a really nice call out to Faye Wallace, who is an absolutely remarkable member of the community. Faye is the host of the HR Coffee Time podcast, so I'm happy to plug other podcasts on this one. And it was just really nice to see that appreciation. I think social media can so often be used for bringing people down or having a cheap pop, and Pete just popping up and going, do you know what, I've been thinking about Faye and she's awesome. One, it's a sentiment I share, but secondly, more of that from the community will always be welcome. Before we get on though, just to find out a little bit more about yourselves as well as the organisation, what have you been... I'll start with you, Alix. What have you been reading, watching? What's been catching your attention recently?
Oh, well, the last time I was on the podcast, I talked about my obsession with romantasy novels, so maybe not down that route this time. But interestingly, I've been whipped up in the frenzy of Netflix's biggest craze at the minute, which is the K-pop Demon Hunters. Now, bear with me, because it's Japanese anime, singers by day, demon hunters by night, but massive lessons around, culture, modern, ways of working, performance, teamwork, coming together, battling challenges. So there's a huge link there in
Battling demons. Yeah.
In finding, inspiration in somewhere where you wouldn't expect to find inspiration. But it's amazing. Give it a watch.
Okay, I had not expected that to be the recommendation.
Honest.
I'm intrigued by the fact it is. And I'm all up for a bit of demon battling. What about you, Mark?
I am struggling to sort of keep on par with you now, Alix. But
It's quite a high bar.
What am I doing? I guess I am. I love my Netflix. I love my dog, Baxter, which I think you guys have all met. I am going back into the olden days, so I'm looking sort of at sort of thrillers and police programs on Netflix, like Line of Duty, and I watched the most recent one, which is called Adolescence. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I'm a bit of a TV thing. Do you want me to? Was it supposed to be HR related, or
no? It didn't have to be HR related.
To be something that you're obsessed
If anyone's wondering why I've met Mark's dog, Mark is a really long-standing volunteer of ours. I have not. I cannot claim with a membership of 165,000 that I've met everyone's pets. It's not the way that works. I've just finished a book on con artists and how people get deceived in different scenarios and the psychology behind that. And I've just ordered a book on the history of assassinations and paid killers. and the socioeconomic backgrounds that trigger that, and the different methodologies through the years. I don't know why. I think I just couldn't sleep one night. I'm not particularly into assassins. That would be a weird thing
It's interesting,
to be
isn't
into. But yeah, it crossed my path. I went, to your point around things you might get lessons for work from. I think sometimes extreme scenarios can give you some insight into work. So for everything we'll be discussing today, it's a reminder that if individual organisations do come up, there's probably more going on behind the scenes with them. So we will never comment directly on the good or bad of a situation, but we'll talk broadly, thematically about things. But that said, as we move into our first one, there are some noise and some early signs around what might potentially be the start of an early shift, or it might be a one-off, which are the stories in recent weeks about the pharmaceutical multinational Moderna and the UK Housing Association Peabody taking some different steps with the way they approach HR and technology. So at Moderna, there's a decision to merge HR and IT teams into a single people and digital technology function, which is a broader organisational shift driven by the growing role of AI in organisations. And at Peabody, they've embedded strategic HR partners, data specialists, and their own internal academy to bind people's strategy more effectively to the pace of change. I think I managed to read those out effectively. So apparently a survey of IT leaders thinks that nearly 2/3 of them think that the functions will converge within 5 years. And I guess converge and merge are very different things. But I know you've both got quite interesting views on this. So Alix, I'm going to start with you and then we'll shift to Mark, but feel free to argue between each other as we go through.
Let's see how heated we get. I'm a huge kind of fan of this as a topic. I think how we evolve our workplaces to be more digital and kind of mirror how we operate as consumers in the world is a move that needs to happen. But, like you said about merge, converge, this has got to be, it's more than a structural move. I suppose it needs to be a cultural and strategic shift, but done well. There's, evolutions in the digital landscape around data and workforce planning and colleague experience and the stuff that we get excited about. But it's not just about sticking two functions together and, presenting this Frankenstein thing to the organisation. I think whatever we do has got to be led with clarity and leadership and purpose, and a real kind of story behind it and strategic intent and competitive edge. What do we want to really achieve from this? But yeah, it's got to be well thought through. In my own personal style, I always get close to the IT functions because it's usually where the colleague is having sticking points within their experience. So partnering with them to really bring in, well, this is what our people are facing at the front line, at the edge of productivity, where we carry out our business to innovate and modernise and clean up where we can. But yeah, it's got to be done with some fervour.
Yes.
Or not at all.
Or not at all. If the business isn't ready, you've got to be ready, otherwise it just becomes...
Do you know, when I read the brief, I was like, absolutely not. There's no chance that they should be together. And then I slept on it and I was actually thinking, of course they should, because it's gone way beyond the sort of, just fixing the laptop now, when you're talking about IT, it's way beyond that, it's then evolved into cloud and networks and whatever else. We're now talking about AI and the transformation of how that is going to affect work in the years to come. Everyone is quite cautious about it, whether they're going to lose their jobs or whether it's going to be dehumanized and whatever else. So actually merging it with our profession will mean that the evolution of AI or the evolution of technology will be humanized in some sense, because there will be the ethical side of it, of making sure that we do things the right way and we use it for the right things, but also making sure that it's embedded into our culture in the right way, whether that's in the working practices, whether that's using it to communicate externally, whether that's to communicate internally, or for, our procedures, whether we're using it to write documents or whether we're using it to create websites or whatever. I think it will actually add a lot of value to the organisation.
I think about, the digital fluency within HR as a profession as well. So even if you think about, we're kind of becoming mini developers ourselves already, creating our own dashboards, playing around with multi-layered systems already. So I think we can be at kind of the cutting edge of something. What we don't want to do is in 10 years' time have the old accusation of, HR can't do numbers.
Yeah.
It'll be, HR aren't, digital or driven or whatever. So, yeah, I think we can get ahead of something.
Really careful, though, about being clear on what HR can do. Because you wouldn't want to swap out your HR service desk for your IT service desk in most organisations.
No.
For a number of reasons.
Yes.
A couple of reasons, actually, probably. We wouldn't be great at fixing laptops, to Mark's point. But separately, there's a really important separate skill set and value that HR brings. And that's why I think it's really important that organisations think about this in a rich and contextually informed way. And we spoke a little bit about this earlier. I can see some of those areas that we need to work hand in glove, but actually we also need to not mistake one for the other. If I made a comparison, I think the shift from employee engagement to employee experience has benefited quite a bit, to your point around consumers, from us looking at some of the tools used in customer experience and going, how do we overlay those internally? But systems, infrastructure and architecture is very different to doing OD.
Is it?
Let's go for that.
I might challenge you there. So if you take something like, I don't know, however many S's McKinsey are playing with these days, might be up to 9 or something now, but 7.
Bonus S's.
Bonus S's. System, structure, strategy, skills, all which is, a out of the box OD kind of tool. I think you can absolutely think about architecture as a subset of OD. It doesn't replace it, but approaching as a colleague, what have I got access to here and how does it all fit together? And then therefore, how does it transcribe into the colleague experience? Absolutely is an element of OD, but I'd totally take your point around IT, HR are different mindsets, and we've got to be clear about that and make sure that there's still whatever that word is. What is that word?
I'm going for demarcation.
Demarcation of accountability.
It could have been demilitarised. Could have gone either way.
It could have been anything. Demarcation of accountability. Otherwise, it just can come messy.
And so I can see the opportunity, I guess, to your point, that's where some of the risk is. And it's been cognizant of both of those in terms of design.
Yeah.
I do agree with it, but I think we as a profession still need to sort of form our identity as a profession, because like you say, what can we do and what can't we do? When you're looking at the HR sphere that Jackie did many years ago, we do recruitment, we do advice, we do a strategy, we do engagement, we do all these different things. What does that mean as an actual profession? And then how can we blend that with the IT function? Because then, if we don't do that, then we're at fear of kind of losing our identity when we kind of, the people and tech people or something, whatever it is. But you kind of want to have your own stake in the ground when you do converge, as you say.
Yeah, and what the opportunity is in merging, obviously gaps will be exposed, but then the plan is how you then solve those gaps, which maybe I'm just more risky in my approach, but I'd be like, do it, and then we'll see what falls out.
We certainly need people experimenting. So one of the things we're going to be doing at the CIPD is over the coming months, you'll see us launch a couple of things. One, looking at the future of work, and then informed by that, the future of the profession. And there's no doubt, to your point, that as the external environment changes and the way that organisations need to react to that changes, there are things that the profession will need to consider doing differently. It's still just that contextual overlay, isn't it? So it might work in it might be necessary in an organisation 90,000, might not be necessary if you're in an organisation of 20, or it might be perfect either way round. And I think that notion of experimentation and being informed by evidence is really important for us to adhere to over the next few years.
And how do we have a voice in the wider landscape as well? So we see so much, people, HR, tech, coming down the line. Whereas our voices, experts in actually this is what businesses are challenged with, and this is what we need, or this is what works. Because we often find when we go to market, when you say looking for tech or digital tools, and I've never met a one that is perfect. But maybe if that conversation was a little more joined up, then.
It's a bit of a race against time as well. So for our organisation, we're quite fluid because, you can do more or less, let's make the decision, start it tomorrow. Whereas for you, I would imagine shifting a 90,000 employee company
and
would
dismantling.
take you so much time that AI would have probably moved on by a certain degree. So you've kind of got a bit of a race against time to actually implement it. And if it is going to become a joint function, you've got to kind of almost understand the purpose of that function first.
Yeah.
And really relatively quickly, if you are going to be doing that.
We're having a really interesting discussions internally about our approach to AI, and we've put a policy out there because there's got to be some ethics, especially around IP and customer data and that type of thing. So things have got to be kind of locked into the business's infrastructure rather than it be open channels. But it's really interesting when we're talking about skills and how skills evolve and how much onus is on the colleague rather than on the business. Because to your point, Mark, by the time, a big, heavy organisation of 90,000, evolves, the world will be ahead. So how do you stay agile when you're kind of pulling a big tanker with you as well? So we're really thinking about, actually, let's let colleagues lead this, but within a space where they can experiment and innovate and that type of thing. Because if we mandate what AI skills are needed, and then you build that into, mandatory or compulsory learning, something like that, it'll be out of date and business will have moved on. So it's really interesting, live conversation.
So we'll be doing some of that landscape work for the profession. Keep a lookout if you're listening to this for ways to contribute, because it's really important that we've got a member voice in that, as well as being informed as you'd expect us to be by a range of different evidence points. But I'm excited about it. It's an opportunity for us to keep shaping and refining the contribution that we make to business, contribution we make to the economy more broadly, and the difference it makes to people. And we're going to move on to now something that is uniquely about people. And once again, I'll say you probably wouldn't want to sit in the inbox of the IT team as currently configured. Just being really open to different possible futures. So we've had a conversation on the CIPD community recently, and we're going to start trying to bring more of those into these podcasts. So if you have a problem and no one else can help, either go to the A team or the CIPD community, and we'll keep bringing them in and asking our experts. So it's been a recent thread around people looking for advice on how to deal with loud, opinionated employees who have no time for their manager's authority and whose so-called banter has tipped into something far more corrosive. And the stat that we picked out around the kind of boundaries between outside of work and inside of work that we thought was most stark was a recent survey that suggests more than a third of workers will be comfortable sharing details of their sex life with their manager. Peter Cheese and I rarely talk about that. If that's the first thing people are thinking about, it's not come up. We're together a while now. He's never asked, I've never told. That's pretty much where we're at, and I've never offered. But that blurring of boundaries, where's the line between healthy openness and harmful oversharing? So for the people who contributed to the community and went, this is a challenge for us, where do you draw that line? But also, you're both really senior. What do you do with that?
I mean, this podcast recorded, you kind of see us, scooting in our chairs. We're over-indexing here, really, aren't we? I'm not quite sure where to start. I'm really not. Diplomatically going to throw it over to Mark.
Oh, thank you.
I really like the way that was handled, by the way. What do I think of it? I think it's one for Mark.
Yeah. I think you've got to... look, we're all trying, especially since the pandemic, to make sure that people feel like they belong, they can come into work and they can offload some of their issues because that will impact on their performance. This kind of stuff where, talking about your sex life or dates last night and going into graphic detail and stuff, again, is contextualised because I think, certain cultures may have a different barometer. I can't imagine, working at the House of Lords and talking about your sex life in the office, whereas in advertising, it's usually quite light, and I can imagine they're talking about their dates, but they might not go to the graphic details. So it's contextualised. But I think there needs to be some level of professionalism within your organisation, I don't know whether that can become policy at all, but I think there needs to be some level of professionalism that the manager has clout to say, I can't be talking about that kind of conversation with you because we are colleagues and on the surface we are friendly, but we're not friends, may not want to say it in those kind of words, but I think that's the kind of the premise of what you want to try and get over.
We're not friends. That's what I took from that. Convey to everyone you work with, we're not friends. No, I absolutely understand where you come from. Do you have any thoughts on this?
I do. I mean, it's just a massive case study on situational awareness, isn't it? If rather than policising it, maybe it's about giving managers, really sophisticated ways to feedback or handle the conversation, which is with openness and compassion and clarity, and saying, I'm really struggling to have this conversation with you now. I'd much prefer if we, approached our one-to-ones like this. So still professional, but aware and tackling the situation almost, and then that pulls through into the wider workplace as well. But there's a need for accountability here as well.
There's an education and coaching bit to it as well, which is like these conversations have been happening. Mm-hmm. That's not appropriate for where we are. Mm-hmm. That's not the way that we do things. You probably didn't understand that. It's a reasonable ask of us for you not to do that. If for anyone, you assume that people aren't going, no one wants me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. In which case, actually, there's an asymmetry of information. You can close that gap if you care enough to do it more towards it.
There is an argument, though, that when we were young, we were there 8 hours a day, spent a lot of our time in the office 5 days a week. It was a different framework, whereas since the pandemic we know that work has become a bolt-on to your life rather than being work being a huge element of your life, and it has blurred the lines. So the younger community, and specifically in this example, I can haven't probably experienced what work was like when we were at work, and therefore professionalism is less important, and therefore that's why they feel they can come into work and talk about things freely like that.
Yeah, and we'll probably close this one off here, but a couple of thoughts on that. One, you can actually see that we've got a good work index that if you go on our website, you'll be able to pick out, and that looks at that motivation. You can see it shifting by generation in terms of why people are in work and what their expectations are. And secondly, it's just this, it's that marrying of things. Things always change in the workplace. There's no way if we were you wouldn't have been doing a podcast 20 years ago, but if we were, we'd probably all be suited and booted in a very different way, with different expectations. And I think it's making sure that organisations are adapting to the people that they are employing and understanding their needs, to the point that you made earlier about people as consumers, but not losing sight of the fact that organisations also have agency and they have a right to expect behaviours of a certain type from their employees. And that will change organisation to organisation. So we've got one more dilemma, and we'll do the two community ones together. So I'm quite enjoying this actually. Like this is nice, like having you two on a panel. So final nugget of wisdom on a CIPD community. So there's been a healthy discussion over the past week or so on the subject of triggers for absence management conversations. So at what stage should you intervene and trigger a formal wellbeing or welfare meeting? And should that be a blanket approach? Should it be manager's discretion? Should it be a trigger that's set centrally? So I guess there's a question around how do you approach it in your organisations? Also, because we work at different organisations, what do you really think works? Because they may vary a bit.
Yeah, they vary wherever. We've got vastly different, size organisations. But so whilst we are huge globally, actually the business is made up of, smaller operating companies and organisations which do things in different ways. Personal opinion, absence triggers they should be a conversation starter rather than a policy tripwire.
Yeah.
But again, I think it comes back to that agency around expectations in the workplace, and something kind of needs to be there, but it shouldn't be a hard and fast rule until it kind of needs to be. Rigid for absence equals a meeting, and then we do this and then we do that seems really impersonal.
Yeah.
So if there's compassion and candour in the conversation, then surely that's a place to start around. These are the expectations, but I understand that there's a conversation that we need to have and a support mechanism that we can build in. But ultimately, we've got organisations to run as well.
Yeah, and I think that just going from that point, ours is on an individual basis. So does the person's absence impact business performance? And the individual manager will probably bring that to us and say, this person's been off far too much because of X, Y, Z. However, what you don't want is, you've got somebody with a quite serious illness will not be treated in the same way with somebody that's, had the sniffles, let's say, for, constantly and regularly. So you kind of have to individualise it, and the impact on business performance and the impact on the rest of the team, etc., etc. But having triggers like that, it ruins culture, I think, because then are you run by policy or are you run by the heart? And I think for us especially, we are quite proud that they've got somebody at my level at a site and a business that's 60 people big, because you would not have a chief people officer at 60 people big. You're talking in the hundreds. So they've put people at the beginning. So there's no way I'm going to come in and start saying, right, you've been sick 4 times, so therefore you're going to be on an absence management program. I'm not going to do that. It's individualised on business performance, and you leave it to the managers.
Yeah. I think the sweet spot though there is guided discretion. The risk with being too flexible is line manager bias. One line manager might treat it with compassion, another with control. Employees experience things in different ways. I jotted down a point earlier. So, absence management is often used as a proxy for engagement, where actually if we can get under the drivers as to what's driving, rather than just the mechanisms of managing it.
So you want clarity, candour, compassion, and consistency.
All the C's.
All taken from what you've said. I feel we've got a new model.
Think of
we've got, over the next couple of weeks, actually, you'll see a new health and wellbeing report coming out from the CIPD. Keep a lookout for that. So if you want to understand absence trends more broadly and some of the challenges in organisations, so that you understand what's a universal issue and what might be local to you. Do keep a lookout for that. I'm pretty sure it's going to be awesome. Final topic that we're going to spend just a few minutes on, if possible. And if we can come up with another model, like the 4 C's model, we'll put it on an infographic and even more famous.
I'm getting jealous here. I need to come up with my own model in
we'll get one. We'll get
You've
one
got your own
beforehand.
ask the CPAP section. Is the way this is working. Now to drivers of high success. So that are often talked about with Rally Masters. So accountability. So we've recorded an episode with Matthew Syed, and the first one's out already. So check that out, and the next one's out within the next month. But somewhat supporting the idea of high performance or high growth, there's a recent article that cited research from Culture Amp that looked at the idea that shared sense of responsibility and transforming accountability from a top-down demand into a collective standard, there's a mouthful, was pivotal to high growth. So how do you make accountability something everyone owns rather than something that is imposed from the top? So how do you get that sense of people are getting up in the morning and they've got their own personal drive, but it's aligned with the organisation? And how do you do that without just piling pressure onto people?
I'm going to go with textbook stuff. So I love quoting Patrick Lencioni. If you're going to get accountability, you've got to start with the basis of trust. If people can trust and they can say things with impunity to a certain degree, then we can have healthy conflict and disagreements and things like that without fear of losing your job. Therefore, I will take responsibility for that muck up of something that went wrong. So we've had that a couple of times in recent times, actually, where one of our employees, we're a digital agency, so overspent on Meta for a client, and one of the employees who'd spent a lot more, and it was a bigger problem, came in, absolutely my problem, do not blame anybody else, I absolutely messed up, please don't, and was real tail between the legs. He ended up keeping his job. Another person tried to get away with it, hide it, didn't show any value towards the overspend of that money. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, and that's not necessarily the consequences of that was his attitude to that, rather than not coming in and going, do you know what, guys, I take full responsibility.
Yeah,
so
integrity and accountability often
absolutely. So I do feel that we've got a good level of psychological safety in our organisation and good level of trust, because people can disagree with us, have healthy conflict, and people are taking accountability for their own areas. Yes, there are still issues, but there's generally the newer people that haven't quite built that kind of, foot under the table yet kind of experience, but people are take accountability for their areas for sure.
Alex, final thoughts from you.
I mean, accountability without trust is micromanagement, right? Accountability with trust is empowerment. I think the danger is that accountability at the minute is over romanticized.
Yeah.
If people aren't crystal clear about how their contribution, adds to the organisation, how they can be accountable, it's kind of all just gonna fall over. So we need to make sure that it's not a one size fits all model. Different businesses, different functions, different people require that at different levels. So how can you kind of create an ecosystem of accountability that's not imposed, it's shared, and it's right for the organisation, because high growth isn't about just working harder. So everyone being crystal clear on how we all work together to achieve
the greater good.
Fantastic, thank you. So some key tips for organisational performance there. There's a number of things that Alex said which will be available on t-shirts very rapidly.
K-pop and CPAP.
Yeah,
K-pop and CPAP. It's the overlap that no one knew they needed.
Like that.
And it's probably worth pointing out, actually, for anyone who's when Mark, you were saying you like your models. That's 5 dysfunctions of a team, isn't it? That you're kind of working out that pyramid. So anyone who hasn't seen it, it is a nice way of thinking about where accountability falls down. And quite often it is because I agreed with you, just to get it out of the way, but I never thought it was going to work. And therefore, when you come back and go, why hasn't this worked? I go, well,
and you've got to look inwards as well. Inward. If you haven't got trust in your organisation, you can't just tell people, trust me. There's a reason. So you've got to kind of look inward and say, what are we doing wrong that isn't influencing trust? Is it the leadership? Is it the way that we work? Is it the way we speak? Psychological contract. Yeah. You've got to kind of do some kind of audit in your organisation.
Getting the buy-in, right?
Yeah,
take accountability for it. So that's all. Well, I'm just going to go away from this very proud of me. That's the way this works. So that's all from us today. I'd like to absolutely thank our guests, because it's been super fun. Alex and Mark, for sharing your thoughts. And as ever, to you, our listeners, for tuning in. I've stopped recommending that you find this in different places, because you're obviously finding it if you're listening. But we do publish new episodes every fortnight, so do make sure to catch up with everything and make sure that you're subscribed. I've been David D'Souza. I assume I still will be. I don't know who wrote this script. And this is the HR People Pod.